The Untenable Economics of Herman Daly. Herman Daly was a leading figure in the field of ecological economics, renowned for his critical perspective on traditional economic paradigms and his advocacy for sustainability-focused frameworks. Born on July 21, 1938, in Houston, Texas, Daly earned a Bachelor of Arts degree in economics from Rice University and later completed a Doctor of Philosophy in economics at Vanderbilt University. His academic training in conventional economic theory provided a foundation for his later critiques of its limitations, particularly regarding its treatment of environmental and resource constraints. During his early career, Daly served as a professor of economics at Louisiana State University, where he began developing his ideas on the incompatibility between economic growth and ecological limits. Deeply influenced by the works of Nicholas Georgescu-Roegen and other pioneers of bioeconomics, Daly questioned the prevailing assumption of infinite growth within a finite planetary system. He emphasized the thermodynamic realities governing resource use, particularly the concept of entropy, which underscores the irreversible transformation and depletion of natural resources in economic processes. In the 1980s, Daly joined the World Bank as a senior economist in the Environment Department. During his tenure, he challenged the institution and its growth-focused development model, arguing for an approach that prioritized sustainability and equitable resource distribution. Daly, with his influence at the World Bank, was personally instrumental in fostering discussions about integrating environmental considerations into development policy. Although his views often diverge from the prevailing orthodoxy within the institution and further introduce many unrealistic and untenable expectations on the people, only enforceable by force from an authoritarian system of governance. The scholarly contributions of Daly are extensive and include seminal works such as Steady-State Economics and For the Common Good, co-authored with theologian John B. Cobb Jr. These texts laid the intellectual groundwork for the steady-state economic model, which advocates for stabilizing both population and consumption levels to maintain a balance between human activities and ecological systems. His writing is characterized by its interdisciplinary approach, bridging economics, ecology, and ethics. His legacy is defined by his insistence on aligning economic systems with the physical realities of Earth and the environmental and sociological ecosystems, as well as his enduring influence on the field of ecological economics. Herman Daly and his contributions to ecological economics provide valuable insights into the intersection of economic activity and environmental sustainability. His advocacy for steady-state economics highlights the importance of balancing human consumption and population levels with the ecological carrying capacity of the planet. These principles do at least challenge the conventional growth-centric economic models of global finance, and also serve as a foundation for rethinking the relationship between economic systems and environmental limits. However, while there are significant and beneficial lessons to be drawn from Daly and his theories, their implementation raises critical concerns, particularly regarding the potential infringement on personal freedom and liberty, the exacerbation of inequalities, and unintended consequences, most likely and most notably among the already vulnerable populations of the world. One of the principal critiques of the economic, even the underlying financial framework as set forth by Herman Daly, lies in its reliance on centralized enforcement mechanisms to maintain the steady-state socioeconomic and financial constraints on population and consumption. The enforcement of such measures inevitably necessitates the introduction of force or coercion, thereby curtailing individual freedoms and liberties and putting the already vulnerable populations at risk of being economically ostracized and prevented from participating within the larger socioeconomic framework. Policies aimed at imposing strict limits on resource use or population growth are also likely to face resistance and can disproportionately impact the poor and marginalized. This will inevitably lead to a new age of class warfare and result in social disruption, which is much more likely to be detrimental to both the global population and the environment, serving to benefit only those who are already well established within the larger socioeconomic systems. Historically, centralized approaches to resource distribution and population control have resulted in inequitable outcomes, with the wealthy and powerful exploiting systemic loopholes to avoid restrictions put in place by those in a position of power, who are again personally enriched by those who fatten their campaign coffers and offer lucrative job offers to the policymakers. This documented historical pattern of economic and political abuse only reinforces existing inequalities and shifts the burden of compliance onto those least able to bear it, perpetuating cycles of poverty and exclusion, to the extent that it would put entire populations at risk of literal extinction. Further, proposals from some of Daly's adherents advocating for radical reductions in population raise ethical and practical concerns. These proposals often fail to account for the cultural, social, and historical context of at-risk populations, exacerbating their vulnerabilities and, in some cases, further contributing to the risk of literal extinction for certain groups, populations, cultures, and societies. Such approaches are grossly antithetical to the principles of equity and justice that Daly himself ostensibly sought to promote. The imposition of draconian population policies risks undermining the very sustainability goals they aim to achieve by alienating local communities and eroding social trust, ultimately resulting only in social unrest and disruption, and quelled only by the introduction of force against the general population. A more viable alternative to the centralized enforcement of the principles and theories introduced by Daly involves the establishment of localized and decentralized economic systems that operate within the broader socioeconomic framework, integrated into the socioeconomic systems only through a centralized organizational structure separate and apart from the decentralized organizational structures for any purpose other than to serve as a means of coordination and logistical support. Localized systems can prioritize community-level resource management, economic self-reliance and resilience, and a potentially more symbiotic relationship with the local environment. These systems offer a more adaptable and inclusive model that respects cultural and ecological diversity within the local context, while at the same time reducing dependence on global market dynamics and unsustainable consumer practices as promoted by the current global socioeconomic and financial systems currently in place, without any adverse infringement upon the larger systems. To ensure the success of decentralized systems, there must be integration with a private, centralized organizational structure that provides logistical and financial support without overriding local autonomy. Such a structure can serve as a coordinating body, facilitating the exchange of resources and knowledge while upholding the principles of subsidiarity and local empowerment. Complementing this approach, the introduction of comprehensive educational systems should play a pivotal role in fostering a cultural shift toward sustainable or even regenerative living. Education should emphasize the benefits of localized economies only tangentially related to the larger socioeconomic and financial systems, environmental stewardship, and the integrated and adaptive nature of human and ecological well-being. By establishing a more well-informed and civically engaged polity, such systems can drive the voluntary adoption of sustainable practices, minimizing the need for coercive measures. Ultimately, this approach offers a more viable and peaceful path toward sustainability that avoids the pitfalls of centralized, top-down enforcement through the introduction of force and the restriction or elimination of personal freedoms. Instead, it preserves individual freedoms and communal autonomy within the local context, while still promoting a more balanced relationship between human activity and the natural world. By addressing systemic inequalities and prioritizing the needs of the poor and vulnerable, it provides a more equitable and sustainable alternative to models that rely on restrictive and exclusionary measures. This decentralized, integrated framework aligns more closely with the principles of ecological economics while also mitigating the risks of adverse impacts associated with heavy reliance on globalized consumerism and market dynamics, and the enforced imposition of centralized control wherein the entire local context becomes irrelevant in search of socioeconomic and financial systems for the greater good.
Please like, share, subscribe, and comment below.